Welcome to ClubhouseNews.com. You're tuned in to Clubhouse News Weekend for the week ending Saturday, September 27th. I'm Jenny.
And I'm Devin. Greenhouse gases released by factories, cars, and other sources of man-made pollution are triggering unnatural climate change by trapping the sun's rays in a phenomenon known as global warming. This week, leaders from 100 countries came together in New York for a United Nations Climate Summit to turn back the rising ocean tides and develop alternative energy strategies. Scientific reports showed that last year's carbon emissions of 706 million tons broke the previous year's records. So it's no surprise that wacky weather is hitting countries with floods, heat waves, polar vortexes, and droughts as the environment struggles to maintain the balance. That's why celebrities and politicians are turning out in huge numbers at the UN Climate Summit, as many of them believe there is no bigger issue in the world right now than climate change. China, India, and Russia were absent from the summit, despite their countries coming in first, third, and fourth place respectively for pollution emissions in the form of carbon dioxide. Because of their frequent refusal to consider meaningful changes and the large amounts of toxins created by traditional energy companies in the coal and gas industries, massive pro-environment protests have spread across the globe. One thing is for sure, lots of influential people are standing together to try and make some positive changes.
Over 140 international leaders gathered at the United Nations headquarters in New York for the 69th session of the UN General Assembly. The UN was founded in 1945 to promote global cooperation and replace the League of Nations, which was created in 1920 as a result of the Paris Peace Conference that ended World War I. Within the UN, the General Assembly is the only branch of the organization where all nations have equal representation. Big decisions, like those on peace and security, require a 2/3 majority vote to pass. Others can be achieved with just a simple majority of over 50%. The General Assembly this week followed the UN Climate Summit, which brainstormed solutions to the growing environmental problems created by man-made pollution. USA President Barack Obama called for international teamwork on containing the Ebola outbreak crisis sweeping through Africa and battling the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or ISIS. ISIS is comprised of military extremists who are engulfing the Middle East in chaos. Even Iran is concerned about ISIS, despite being at odds with the USA and UK for decades over nuclear power development. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani met face-to-face with UK Prime Minister David Cameron this week, in the first such meeting between leaders of the two nations since 1979.
The USA's first African-American Attorney General, Eric Holder, announced his resignation this week, but he will remain in office until a successor is nominated and confirmed. The Attorney General is the head of the USA's Department of Justice and the chief law enforcement office of the country. This person is nominated by the President and confirmed by the U.S. Senate. As the chief officer of the Department of Justice, the Attorney General enforces federal laws, provides legal counsel in federal cases, interprets the laws that govern executive departments, and examines alleged violations of federal laws. The very first U.S. Attorney General was Edmund Randolph, and he was appointed in 1789 under President George Washington. Randolph was behind the famous Virginia Plan, which suggested that there be a separation between the powers of the three branches of government: the law enforcing executive branch, the law evaluating judicial branch, and the law-making legislative branch. Much of the Virginia Plan was written into the USA's Constitution, the highest law in the land, and still applies to our government today.
Earlier this year, the West African nation of Guinea experienced a pretty wild outbreak of Ebola, a fatal virus that kills up to 90% of people who contract it. The virus has continued to spread to surrounding countries like Sierra Leone and Liberia, infecting about 5,800 people. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or the CDC, says that Ebola could potentially infect up to 1.4 million people in Liberia and Sierra Leone by January if we don't take drastic measures. Sierra Leone's government has already had to quarantine 1 million people, meaning they're kept separate from non-infected people to avoid the disease spreading. And the United Nations has declared war on Ebola. The CDC and World Health Organization are currently fast-tracking the development of a treatment that has worked on several people so that more people will have access to the potentially life-saving treatment.
Derek Jeter, the legendary captain and shortstop for the New York Yankees, played his final game last Thursday night in Yankee Stadium. He went out with a bang too, with a game-winning walk-off single during the 9th inning that sent the Yankees to a 6-5 win over the Baltimore Orioles. After 20 seasons, fans will miss their beloved captain, who is a 5-time World Series champion. He's viewed as being pivotal to the Yankees' rise in the late 1990s and early 2000s, and is the team's all-time career leader in hits, games played, stolen bases, and at-bats.